This is a very disturbing story, and I think I first talked about this a year or two ago, but there's been an update that's kind of good news, and I wanted to share that with you. But I'm going to go through this because, again, very disturbing story. So, in 2011, there was a man in Arizona. His name is Paul Adams, and he confessed to his Mormon bishop, whose name is John Herod, that he was doing something very, very disturbing to his 5-year-old daughter. And I don't want to say it on here, but the answer is yeah. So he confessed that to his Mormon bishop. And so, what did the bishop do when he heard this confession? The Mormon Church has a helpline that bishops are supposed to call when they are wondering what they're supposed to do. And it's basically staffed by lawyers who work for the Mormon Church. And the answer is always don't do anything that's going to hurt the church. There's a lot of articles written about the helpline. But this guy, John Herod, he calls the helpline and he was told, keep that information to yourself. And don't tell police and don't tell local child welfare officials. Just don't do anything about it. So, John Herod, the bishop, he didn't tell law enforcement, but even he seemed to be like, well, what can I do then to put a stop to this? And he was trying to figure out what to do, but he did not tell law enforcement. Well, guess what happened shortly after that? Here's an article from Arizona Central around that time. The man continued to hurt his daughter. Oh, wait. And later, after her birth in 2015, his infant daughter. Not only did he keep attacking his own daughter, sexually attacking his own daughter, he had another baby and then started going after her. And then it gets worse. He made videos of the encounters and posted them on adult websites, which were eventually discovered by Interpol, reported to his employer, US Customs and Border Protection, and led to criminal charges. So the only reason this guy actually got caught is because when he was uploading videos of this horrible stuff he was doing on some website, secular authorities saw what he did, traced it back to him, and arrested this guy. Meanwhile, the Mormon bishop knew about all this before it got even worse, and did absolutely nothing. So Paul Adams, the guy who we're talking about here, he was arrested in 2017. I will tell you that his children, and he had like 5 or 6 children altogether, they were eventually adopted by different families. So like the kids were finally away from their parents, biological parents. They were put in better hands. The wife, Paul Adams's wife, apparently knew about all this, and she was also arrested and she was indicted on 12 criminal counts. She pleaded guilty. She was told to spend 2.5 years in prison, which she did, and she was released in 2020. Paul Adams was indicted on 11 counts of child sexual abuse, but while he was awaiting trial in 2017, he decided to Epstein himself in the prison. So he's no longer with us. So that's the story of Paul Adams. So here's where we get to a different part of this story. In 2021, those children of his, they are somewhat grown up, a little more than they were back in the day. And 3 of the children of Paul Adams decided to sue the Mormon Church. Basically, they said you allowed the abuse to continue even though you had knowledge that could have stopped it. And in fact, their attorney, the kid's attorney, her name is Lynn Cadigan. Let me see if I could pull this up here. Yeah, this is what she said at the time. If I can find this. Oh, I don't have it in front of me. But basically what she said is that this case involves horrible sexual, physical, and emotional abuse of children between the ages of 6 weeks and 12 years old that went on for 7 years. She said the Mormon church leaders knew about the abuse, and yet no one reported these crimes to the authorities. The Mormon church leaders gave guidance and care to these children for 7 years, sat next to them in church, and allowed these vicious crimes to continue. So these kids sued the church. And then guess what happened in 2023? This is the article. I think this is the last time I talked about this story. Court cites clergy penitent privilege in dismissing child sex abuse lawsuit against Mormon Church. Basically, a court said, well, Paul Adams told the bishop what he was doing, but it was like a Catholic confession. It's supposed to be a secret, so we can't hold the church accountable for not spilling that secret and telling law enforcement what he did. The same rule that we always talk about on this channel that applies to Catholic priests in a confession booth, they said it's the same thing when a Mormon guy admits something to his bishop. That's a confession. He has a right to think it's secret, and the Mormon bishop has no legal obligation to tell anyone what someone said to him. So we're tossing this lawsuit out. And what did that lawyer for the children say when this happened? This is what she said at the time. Lynn Cadigan, an attorney representing the Adams children who filed the lawsuit, said she will appeal the ruling. How do you explain to young victims that a rapist's religious beliefs are more important than their right to be free from rape? She asked. Cadigan also said the ruling, if allowed to stand, would completely eviscerate the state's child protection law. And what did the church say about all this? We're pleased with the decision granting judgment for the church and its clergy and dismissing the plaintiff's claims. Contrary to some news reports and exaggerated allegations, the court found that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and its clergy handled this matter consistent with Arizona law, which is a long way of saying we don't care about the children. You can't get us. We did everything we're allowed to do because we're a religion. And if the kids get hurt, oh, well, that's on you. Shouldn't have looked so sexy in those diapers. Like, that's the church's position when this lawsuit was tossed out of court. It is so heartless and such a dickish statement to make. So that's where we were at in 2023. Honestly, I had not thought much about this case since that time, even though I knew that lawyer said she was going to appeal this ruling. But guess what has just happened now? After all of this, that judge, I should say, let me see if there's anything else here. No, I will just say this is like Exhibit A for why confessions should not be exempt from laws that are meant to protect children. Those mandated reporter laws, like if an adult in a position of power, like a teacher or a social worker, finds out that some child is being abused, they are legally obligated to report that to law enforcement. But religious leaders, in the act of confession, they are exempt from that rule. And they're excited about that. They would rather keep the secret of a child sex predator than protect the kids who are actively getting hurt. And that makes them happy too. So anyway, Arizona, they have this law in place. I've already made videos about how in Washington state, they just passed a law saying priests cannot get away with keeping this sort of stuff a secret. And both the Catholic Church and the Trump government have filed a lawsuit to overturn that law. We're still waiting on that decision, but that is happening right now. Anyway, I will jump ahead a little bit to just say that there are 33 states that exempt clergy from laws that require professionals to report this abuse. 33 states have this priest loophole in their law books. And there's lobbying by the Catholic Church and the Mormon Church and Jehovah's Witnesses to make sure it stays that way. Okay, so why am I talking about this today? Because all of this happened in 2023. Because last week, they did appeal that case. That lawyer for the kids, she did appeal that decision. And last week, we got a response. The Arizona Court of Appeals issued their ruling on this case. And this is kind of incredible. Look at this. Jane Doe 1, 2, and John Doe, the two girls and a boy, and they're suing the corporation of the president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This is a ruling they made on July 29th, 2025. And so what did they say in this lawsuit? Basically, the appellate court, 3 judges unanimously said, hey, judge who dismissed this case earlier, there are a lot of things you did not consider when you were going through this case. And so we're undoing your ruling. It's off the books. And we're going to make you take another look at this case because there's a lot of stuff you need to explain. They're not saying the judge has to rule one way or the other, but they're saying there's a lot of factors you did not correctly consider. So, for example, one of the things they pointed out is that after Paul Adams made this confession to the bishop, I told you that the bishop called the helpline and they're like, don't do anything. And the bishop's like, well, I got to do something to try to put a stop to this. What can I do? He said, hey, Paul Adams, what you just said to me about what you do to your daughter, that is bad. I'm going to make your wife come in with me and we're going to meet as the three of us. And you're going to tell your wife what you've been up to. And the bishop, I think, thought if he tells his wife what he's doing, maybe she can stop him from doing it. And then I haven't broken my vows as a bishop, but the child's going to be safe. I think, best case scenario, that's what the priest thought he was doing. But the thing is, as soon as Paul Adams told his wife what he was doing, are we still doing a confessional at this point? And this is what the judges said at the appellate court. Look at this. One thing you got to consider, Paul repeated his confession to his wife. I don't know how you pronounce it, Lisa. But they said, the children contend the trial court erred when they said that also counts as a confession. They allege that Paul impliedly and expressly waived the privilege when he told his wife what he did. So now that is admissible evidence. Most notably, they claim that Paul Adams repeating his confession in his wife's presence amounted to a waiver, which required the bishop to report it to law enforcement. So at that point, Paul Adams is no longer confessing to the bishop. He's confessing to his wife. The bishop's just in the room overhearing it. And now he is a mandated reporter. He should have had to confess it. And these judges said, yeah, how come you didn't think about that one, judge? So that's an interesting thing that they pointed out. Now, the church's argument to this is that the rules of secrecy of confession, that still applies when you are talking to couples. And also the church said, who cares what the rules are? The bishop believed he had a religious duty of confidentiality. He thought it had to be confidential. So you can't blame us for not reporting this to law enforcement. That is the church's position on what I just told you. But despite all of that, this is what the judges said about that. Let me make sure I'm finding it here. This is what they said. A reasonable fact finder could also conclude Paul's confession to his wife, Lisa, amounted to a waiver of the clergy penitent privilege. So you got to take that into consideration. So that is a big freaking deal. Here's another thing. The lawsuit also said that Paul Adams confessed to his crimes during a disciplinary meeting. Because guess what? The Mormon Church is like, we may have to kick you out of the Mormon Church because we think all this molesting is making us look bad. So he confessed to what he did to like a panel of people who are going to decide his fate. But is that a confession? And the lawsuit said, no, that's not a confession. This is just a guy telling these other Mormons what he did. They should have to report it to law enforcement. They're not even clergy members on the disciplinary panel. And the church said, well, who cares if they're not clergy? Disciplinary meetings are there to provide spiritual guidance, so it counts as a confession. And the judges said, come on now, the presence of people who are not clergy members at that disciplinary hearing, that ought to count for something, right? This is what they said. Look at number 30, paragraph 30. During Paul's first excommunication proceeding, he was asked to confess or allow his confession to be heard before the council, but he refused to do it. At the later proceeding, blah, 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 Paul chose to confess his abuse before the council. A jury could reasonably infer that Paul's actions in that later proceeding voluntarily waived the clergy penitent privilege. So if we're thinking about that, shouldn't the church have reported it This judge should have considered that. That's amazing. And then the last thing, and this is kind of amazing, the Mormon Church actually has a rule book for bishops. And let me show you what it says about confession and confidentiality. I'm showing you the Mormon guidebook, the handbook. And it has a section on confidentiality. And if I scroll down here, look at this section right here. In only one situation should a bishop or stake president disclose confidential information without first seeking such guidance. And that is when disclosure is necessary to prevent life-threatening harm or serious injury, and there is not time to seek guidance. So, for example, if someone confesses to a Mormon bishop, I'm going to murder somebody right now after this, then yeah, the Mormon bishop can right away tell law enforcement to try to put a stop to it to prevent that from happening. The Mormon Church is saying that is fine. In such cases, the duty to protect others is more important than the duty of confidentiality. Leaders should contact civil authorities immediately. I gotta say, that actually sounds like a very sensible rule. And the lawsuit filed by the children said, how come the church's own rule book doesn't count for something? Because the rule book says that the bishop should have told law enforcement, because isn't what was happening to their own family members, isn't that serious injury? Shouldn't that have counted? And the judges said, the appellate court said the judge who ruled on this earlier and dismissed the case, he didn't even mention the guidebook. And they wrote, I want to make sure I can show this to you here. In other words, they wrote, here we go, number 34. In other words, there is a genuine issue whether it was reasonable and necessary for church defendants to withhold reporting the child's abuse. Yeah, if the church is saying we had to keep it a secret, according to your own guidebook, no, you didn't. So this appellate court basically tossed out that earlier ruling that was in favor of the Mormon Church, and they told that earlier judge, try again and keep in mind this stuff we are talking about, because the alternative is that the judge rules in a certain way, it goes up to the appellate court, and they say, no, everything here is wrong, we're just undoing what you did. And right now what they're saying is, don't make us do that. You take another stab at this, but you got to keep this stuff in mind. And by the way, we've already written all this, so you know where our minds are at. So wink, wink, try again. And one of the things that came out after all this, guess what the lawyers said after this ruling? You're going to enjoy this. A Tucson-based attorney for the victims, Lynn Cadigan, praised the decision. This renews my faith in the justice system, which is an unbelievable thing. I mean, I feel happy for her, even though this is a horrible situation. So the Mormon Church says it's going to appeal this decision, because of course they are, because they don't care about these children. They just want to prolong their suffering. They have made it so clear that their thirst for secrecy and self-preservation outweighs any moral obligation to protect children from abuse. So it is amazing to me that facing this unimaginable horror of years of abuse that was filmed and distributed by a confessed predator, the Mormon Church responded not with humanity, not with accountability, but with like legalism and repeated attempts to just bury the truth. They weaponized confession as a shield for monsters like Paul Adams. Then they had the audacity to celebrate a legal loophole that let them off the hook. Like, they want nothing more than to protect predators. And now this appellate court says not so fast. So it doesn't just reopen this legal case, it actually cracks open this fortress that the Mormon Church and so many other religious institutions have built around themselves. And here's the church saying, yeah, we're still going to be fighting it. They would rather take away the survivors' time and energy and hope than face any kind of moral or legal reckoning. So the Mormon Church hasn't just failed its most vulnerable members, it is complicit in what they are going through. All right, where are we at with this? What questions do we have here for this story? Those poor kids not getting any justice. Not yet. They're starting to get some. I hope it stays that way. I don't even know how old these kids are now. Because if this stuff was happening in 2011, they're still kids today. I can't believe we're looking for technicalities to lock up child abusers. And the sad part is the technicalities may be what gets justice for these kids. They're only keeping it secret because it's a legal liability. It has nothing to do with confession. It has everything to do with money. This is just sickening beyond belief. And the amazing thing is the Mormon Church has billions and billions of dollars, famously. Like, they are sucking up land. There are so many articles written about how much money they are storing in tithes. It's like tens of billions of dollars, and how much land they are buying up as investments for the future. They have money. It's not a money problem, even though, of course, wealthy organizations and individuals, like, they don't want to lose any of it. But it's not like this is going to decimate the church's bank account. Shouldn't the judge be investigated? I had this conversation on my podcast the other day too. And look, if a judge is wrong, that unfortunately happens. I mean, you hope in a good system of justice that judge's ruling is overturned. That is what happened here so far. I don't think you can investigate a judge for just being an idiot. Even though, listen, there are plenty of Trump judges out there who I don't think are really interested in the rule of law. They already have their conclusion, and then they write their opinions to meet whatever result they want. That's how they work. They shouldn't be investigated for a bad ruling. There are plenty of reasons you should investigate bad judges, corrupt judges, for things like that. But a decision you don't like isn't one of them, as long as there's a system in place to overturn a bad ruling. You know what I mean? So I'm not even saying that judge needs to be investigated, but I am glad that finally that decision was overturned, because that doesn't always happen. Why can't they make a different judge do it instead? If you were unhappy with the judge's decision and you could just get a different judge, our entire legal system would be in chaos. So they roll the dice with these cases. You don't get to pick the judge. Judge doesn't get to pick the case. It is random in that sense. So unfortunately, that happens. You may know this. The Republicans, by and large, conservative groups, they file federal lawsuits in like one or two specific courts in Texas, because there's only one federal judge who's even available to hear them, and it happens to be a Trump judge. So they always file these big lawsuits in that one dude's district for that reason specifically, because if they try to file a lawsuit anywhere else, they don't get to control who the judge might be that the case is assigned to. I hope this gets well publicized. Me too. I mean, this is a wild case. And I mean, I want Mormons to have to explain why they're defending a system that's on the wrong side of this issue.